everybody. Hope all is going well. Welcome to the program. This is Strategy with Dr. M. Stolard. It's your first time with me. Welcome. If this is not your first time, welcome back. Thank you. So today, this is essentially part two. Part two of the previous week's podcast. We were discussing briefly the prepared leader, right? I think every time I try to show this book on the screen, it doesn't really show well. So I make sure to maybe put it up there. But Prepared Leader, it's an amazing book, on crisis management, written by Dr. Erika James and Dr. Lynn Perry Wooten. Both of them have great positions in the respective academic field. The official book title, just for clarity, is The Prepared Leader: Emerge from Any Crisis More Resilient Than Before. So again, Prepared Leader: Emerge from Any Crisis More Resilient Than Before. So again, thank you for all who are willing to join today. First, let me say a couple things. This particular book talks about a few different things. And I think the point to mention this time is that they reiterate that a crisis is really always potentially around the corner, right? And the best way to deal with the crisis is to be prepared for it, right? So you don't want to assume that you're never going to be in a crisis. And if you're paying attention to the news cycle, what's going on in the news and so forth, you'll see that's absolutely true. So again, this is part two, but I don't want to rehash everything that was said in part one. I guess I want to just expand a little bit, talk about a few of the points, and then take on a few questions. So just want to bring attention, quickly to your attention. So again, just want to bring attention to the essential component. It is part of what they call the 9 skills of crisis management. Okay. And so when we look at it through the eyes of, but I like to look at it through the eyes of brand strategy implementation. One of the ways to be proactive is to determine, if your marketing team has influence, and if so, what kind and how much, right? I've said it before, when it's time to downsize, marketing is usually one of the first departments to go or to be cut in half, right? Or to downsize or to remove funding. And so the best way to battle that is to be able to take a look at your marketing department, kind of take a look and assess properly what you're doing good, what you're doing, what you need to be improved on, and then kind of be proactive with that, right? So this is, again, part of the series of your brand strategy in a crisis. And so what I like to do is take a look at crisis management, crisis leadership skill sets. There's different people who are very versed, and kind of use that as a backbone to develop a more effective brand strategy. Okay. So when a brand crisis is upon you, it's crucial to get people to move quickly, right? People meaning your organization, your team, hopefully your clients and your customers if need be, right? Sometimes you need the clients to do certain things, and you want to get them to move quickly. So one of the things you want to do, and this is something that directly comes from the book, is to check on your own leadership style, right? According to Prepared Leader, you should have an inquiry, you should do like a self-inquiry. Do you give priority to trust and transparency? Do you give priority to trust and transparency? Okay. So again, and it comes directly from their section where they talked about skill number 3, having influence, right? When the next crisis hits, you will need influence. You will need to ensure that different and multiple stakeholders can follow instructions, make their own decisions, and perform actions that will often sit outside of their routine, or the things that you do on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so that's basically what we're talking about in that particular area. Okay. So again, you want to check your own leadership style according to the Prepared Leader. Do you give trust and transparency, right? Trust, and just so you know, in my opinion, transparency builds trust. So your staff, the people who report to you, they're going to become more trusting of you as a person who's in the leadership capacity, whether it's as a marketing director or running the entire company. If leaders or people like yourself are communicating with the team, from an honest place, right? Communicate with them honestly and proactively, right? So, if you have to delegate, what does that look like, right? So you're the one that's in charge, but if you have to delegate, what does that look like? Are you willing to delegate to someone who has different expertise than you, right? This is why you want to be able to step up as a marketing team in a time of crisis, right? Because as a marketing department, as a branding department, you can control the messaging. A lot of times you are actually in the position to write the message. You can control the positioning of the organization itself or the particular product that's maybe in dealing with the crisis. You can control the positioning of the CEO. I apologize for that pause, but you control the messaging, right? You can control the positioning of the CEO. If the CEO is not in position to answer certain questions, then you as the brand manager, you as the marketing manager, should be the first to volunteer, right? You want the CEO of the company to know that for them to feel that it's okay to give the reins to someone like yourself. Someone like yourself, meaning someone who deals with marketing, someone who deals with branding, right? If you need someone from outside the box, right? In order to step up, then that means that's an opportunity for you to have to step up, but you want to prepare yourself to speak, but by proactively preparing for these moments, these brand strategy in a crisis moment, and you do this, before you're actually there. And I hope that makes sense, right? So a lot of times, you think the CEO, and then you think, okay, well, you know what? If the CEO doesn't want to take the reins on to be the public face, maybe they give it to the vice president and so forth. But a lot of times the marketing department is a key component that's in a key position because they understand they're in touch with the customers. They understand the buyer persona, the client persona. They understand what the customers wants and needs and so forth. And they're directly in tune with that, or they should be. And because someone like you are directly in tune with that, you are in a position to kind of take the reins in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a brand strategy crisis, So you could say something like, Mr. and Mrs. CEO, we've drafted a clear, concise message that can get the ball rolling in this situation. We feel it addresses the needs of the organization and empathizes with the feelings of our clients and our closest customers, and allow us, to help take one of those things off of your shoulders. Let us speak directly to the clients and to the customers, right? And again, this is all part of like the third question that's inside directly from the book. The section is called having influence, right? So it's one of the 9 key steps, but specifically talking about having influence. So do you communicate your decisions clearly and explain why they matter? That's one of the questions that they indicate. And so that's kind of a little bit of a gist from that. I hope that makes sense to you. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. We have a few questions, so that I would like to kind of address, and we'll go over that in a little bit detail. So I appreciate you for sending these questions in. How can brand strategy help us navigate a crisis effectively, right? How can brand strategy help us navigate a crisis effectively? So a couple of things. In a time of crisis, a brand's reputation, an organization's reputation is going to be severely impacted, right? And we see that what's going on all over the world right now. there is a significant loss of trust and credibility amongst the customers and the clients and the stakeholders, right? In some cases, it's volunteers. However, when you have an effective brand strategy in place, organizations can navigate a crisis more effectively, and then you can begin to rebuild the trust of your audience. And that's the key. Begin to rebuild the trust of your audience. One of the key benefits of having a strong brand strategy during a crisis is that it helps organizations to maintain a clear, consistent message across all communication channels. We've touched on this before, right? This consistency is essential to building trust and credibility with the customers. So are you more likely to remain loyal to a brand, to an organization that is transparent, that is honest, that is forthcoming with information, right? Another benefit of a strong brand strategy in the middle of a crisis is that it helps organizations stay focused, especially in their long-term goals. When you're in the middle of a crisis, one of the things you need to have short-term goals and you need to have long-term goals. And when you have a strong brand strategy in its place, it helps you to you should be keeping those things in mind. By keeping those goals in mind, your organization can make decisions that are directly in line with the overall strategy, the overall mission of the organization, rather than simply just reacting, in the short term. There's nothing wrong with having short-term goals, but you want to keep the long-term goals in your vision as well. So a couple more things. So, according to some research that was done by Elderman, which is a global communications firm, 65% of customers and clients say that the way that a brand responds in the middle of a crisis is a major factor in their decision to continue to doing business with that brand, right? Another way to look at it, in my opinion, is when things are not going well, how is that organization treating you? Right? How are they interacting with you? I think it's simply like if your phone is not working, right? How was T-Mobile or AT&T or Sprint? How are they treating you? Are they treating you the same way when you pay on a monthly basis, or they're looking like it's a pain in the butt? They're looking at you like, man, this is just, I can't believe you're even asking me a question. So this highlights the importance of having a strong brand strategy in place to effectively manage a crisis and maintain, true customer loyalty. One example, a brand that effectively navigated a crisis through a brand strategy. I don't know if I've talked about them before. Tylenol, back in the 80s, the early 80s, had a crisis when, there were people who actually had passed from, taking Tylenol capsules that were laced with cyanide, right? And in response, the company's immediate recalled all the Tylenol products and launched, a massive investigation, a public relations campaign to rebuild the trust with the customers, but they were transparent, taking responsibility, prioritizing the safety of the clients and the customers, and because of that, Tylenol was able to maintain the reputation and regain customer trust. Now, that happened today, I don't know. I hope that would never happen into this day and age. But again, being transparent is also key. And having to react a little bit faster is also key. So having a strong brand strategy in place is necessary, to navigating a crisis effectively. So a couple other questions. How can we ensure that our brand strategy aligns with our crisis response and recovery plans? Today things are going fast, right? With the internet, we blame it all on the internet. It used to be blame it on the microwave, but now it's blaming it on the internet, right? And the world is unpredictable, but it's important to have a intentional crisis response and recovery plan in place for your organization. It's truly important to ensure that your brand strategy aligns with these plans. And by doing so, you maintain consistency, with your messaging, with your actions, right? Which can help you to not only retain the trust of your customers, but build it and build the credibility with your stakeholders and your volunteers during a crisis. So there's a few things to kind of consider in this particular case. And again, we're talking about ensuring that your brand strategy aligns with the crisis response and recovery plans. Aligning your brand strategy with a crisis response recovery plan is necessary for maintaining consistency, credibility, and trust during when times are rough. So one, you want to evaluate your brand's values and purposes on purpose. Assess your core values and the purpose to determine if they remain relevant and authenticate during a crisis. Remain relevant, and are you authentic during a crisis? Identify how these values can guide your response and recovery efforts. Number two, you want to understand the crisis impact. Gain a deep understanding of the impact that has taken place on your organization and on your products, and how your customers feel. Are you empathizing with your clients and your customers? You want to analyze the challenges and opportunities that arise and consider the short-term and long-term plan. We mentioned that earlier. The third thing you want to think about is to review, maybe even adjust your brand positioning, right? Access your positioning in light of your crisis. You may not be in the same position as you once before. You need to be self-aware of that, right? If you were in the number one spot, it's possible that you could be in the number two spot, number three spot. Hopefully that's not the case, but if it is, you need to be self-aware and determine if any adjustments are necessary to address the needs, the expectations of your audience, your key audience, right? The ones who are closest to you. Consider your organization and how your organization can provide valuable support to your customers during a crisis. Next thing you want to do is you want to develop a crisis communication plan if you haven't already. And down below, there's supposed to be a link. I think we got it almost set up. If it's not set up yet, about 50 key questions you want to be able to answer yourself. Something that an external organization may ask you, a news outlet, things of that nature. If you can answer these questions, then it's a great start to preparing to build a brand strategy when it comes to you being in a crisis. Now, you want to ensure that your plan aligns with your brand's tone, your messaging, and the values, and these strategies should address whatever the concerns may be, whatever your clients are saying. So if you're contacting them, staying in touch with them in real time, then you should be proactively addressing these things as well. You want to integrate your brand messaging in your crisis communications as well. Incorporate your organization's key messaging in all of the crisis communications that have taken place. Because you want to be consistent. You want to make sure you're saying the same thing across the board. You don't want to be choppy, saying one thing, something else, and saying something totally different, something else. And then it's why it's always, you see on the news and so forth, when these things happen, you have one key spokesman. And the key spokesman is because you want to make sure everyone's saying the same thing. If you have multiple people talking at the same time, there's a chance that someone else may say it differently. And if you're saying it differently, then you're not saying it the same way, right? You want to be able to provide support, identify ways that your organization can actually provide tangible, hands-on support to those who may have been affected because of the crisis that you may have caused. And that's the part you have to take responsibility for. There's a possibility that if you are in a crisis, you may have been the result of it. A decision that you chose to make. And maybe not you as in the marketing department, but it's possible, or even your boss's fault. But you want to be able to provide support to the people you serve through your organization. So align your support initiatives and your brand values to ensure that there's clear communication. Then you're going to monitor and adjust, right? You want to monitor and adjust. What are the customers and clients saying in real time? You should have tools and software in place to kind of monitor some of these things. Adjust your brand strategy and crisis response plans accordingly to ensure that remain relevant and effective. Now, last couple of things to remember is you should have proactively trained and engaged in your employees. Ensure that your employees understand that the crisis response and recovery plans are aligned with your brand strategy. Train them to effectively communicate the brand's values and messaging during challenging times. Engage them in a process and encourage their input to foster unified approach. Evaluate and learn from the experience. After the crisis has subdued, evaluate the effectiveness of your brand strategy and the crisis response efforts. Identify lessons, learns, and areas of improvement. Use these insights to redefine your brand strategy and your crisis response plans, just in case future challenges present themselves. So aligning your brand strategy with your crisis response recovery plan is an ongoing process. It won't happen just overnight. But if you start on it now, it'll be that much easier for you later on. Now, the last question we'll take on is someone that submitted, should we consider rebranding or modifying your brand identity during a crisis? It depends on a few things. There's really not going to be a cut answer on this, and I'd be doing you a disservice. I'd be giving you bad advice, bad consulting advice if I just said, yes, always, rebrand. It really depends on, how bad the crisis is, that you're dealing with, right? What have been the repercussions of that crisis? How have your customers and clients been affected by it? There's been various scenarios where people have had to change the branding completely, like airplanes and so forth. They've crashed, unfortunately, and so they've had to try to completely change the name of the brand. You may not have to go that far depending on what's going on. So again, I would need a lot more information to be able to answer that clearly. And anyone who just answers that yes, no, maybe so, without clearly understanding or asking more questions or getting more information, I would be hesitant to really use them as a resource, right? So again, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. If you can like and subscribe and spread the word, that would be wonderful. You've been listening to Strategy with Dr. M. Stolard. I am Dr. M. Stolard. And remember, keep pushing forward, drive your influence, and be intentional, right? And we do this by using strategy.